For more on this, we are joined by Wendel Trio. He's a climate policy specialist and the former director of Climate Action Network Europe. Wendel, thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. Now, I want to be realistic with you here. So, 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases carbon emissions. That's the annual figure, approximate annual figure. Are these oil firms really doing anything to bring it down?
Well, I mean, you couldn't say they do nothing because obviously a number of these oil firms have also invested in renewable energy and they will do more of that the more renewable energy becomes economically viable. But it is very clear, and that's what the Secretary General is pointing to, that fossil fuel companies have for decades tried to reduce action by governments to tackle emissions from fossil fuel burning. They have been calling into question whether there was a direct link between burning of fossil fuels and climate change. And that's where the Secretary General refers to that the recent publication in Science has made it clear that actually the scientists of ExxonMobil knew very well what was happening, but the management said something different.
And that's what always happens when it comes to these oil companies. The profit always dominates what the science says.
Yes, and I mean, that's obviously very clear for fossil fuel companies, but for many other companies in the world, and it's one of the other problems that is being raised in Davos, is that there remains a big gap between what companies are saying that they will do and what they say they care about. And of course, they have a lot of good words about sustainability and decarbonization, etc. But there's a difference between what they say and what companies actually do. And so you have a number of companies that clearly take a lead, that want to go for innovation, that are prepared to change. But you also have a number of companies that don't want to do that, that want to see how much profit they can make before they really need to change. And that's the challenge that we have, is that we can't wait anymore. The change needs to happen right now.
And Wendel, correct me if I'm wrong, in many ways, the actions of these energy oil companies are being sanctioned by many countries across the world. Take Germany, for example. It is expanding a coal mine. And I've been doing a lot of research on this topic for the past couple of weeks. And according to some studies, Germany actually does not need the expansion of this coal mine to mitigate the impact of the energy crisis that has been triggered by the war in Ukraine, because that is what Germany is trying to use as a justification. So what I fail to understand is, on the one hand, countries like Germany continue to make pledges to reduce carbon emissions, to protect climate, but on the other, it is expanding a coal mine. So if this is not climate hypocrisy, what is it?
No, I mean, you're very much right. There is actually no need for this mine to be expanded. But anyway, it's a deal that has been made between the German government and the coal industry in Germany. The deal is to bring forward the closure of coal power plants in Germany from 2038 to 2030. And in return, the businesses got some economic advantages. And I think that's a little bit the problem that we see, is that governments often want to make policies. They make big promises and big pledges, but then when it comes down to the reality, in many cases, these policies only will be implemented if governments at the same time give certain financial favors to those companies that might be affected by the policies, and that can't continue. We need to make the change, and yes, there will be some losers there, but those losers, and in particular the fossil fuel industry, have been making massive profits in the past, and definitely in the recent past with the high energy prices. So I think governments must be willing, must be brave to take the necessary decisions very soon.
Indeed. And Wendel, before I let you go, I want to talk about the United Nations. Now, over the past few years, the UN has remained at the forefront when it comes to issuing a statement about protecting our climate. Is there something else that you think the United Nations can do at this point to basically, make sure that fossil fuel companies across the world follow a policy which do not have a negative impact on our climate? Or do you think the UN will keep doing what it is doing right now, continue to release its statements in condemnation of what the fossil fuel industry is doing?
Well, unfortunately, the United Nations is only as strong as the member countries that are part of it allow it to be. And in that sense, I think the UN Secretary General has not so many tools in his possession, and making bold statements is one of the strongest things he can do. But obviously, the United Nations has had a history of trying to regulate companies in terms of sustainability, etc., and that definitely can be strengthened. And I think there's an effort there that can be made by the Secretary General to also strengthen inside the United Nations Secretariat, to strengthen that department that is working on companies and monitoring companies' behavior.
Wendel Trio, it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World.